All right, call the committee of the whole meeting to order. First item would be adoption of the agenda.
Move. Second.
Those in favor? Motion's carried. And we don't have any delegations or minutes or departmental reports. We do have a number of staff reports. First off, we have the assessment roll report for receipt.
Move.
Second.
On receipt, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Any questions for our Director of Finance in that regard, or anything you wish to add, Director of Finance?
Your Worship, the only thing I point out is already in the memo. It's on our website. If people's assessment has risen by more than 1%, whether it's residential or commercial, and they don't understand why, then they should be looking at BC Assessment's website and contacting BC Assessment. They've got an appeal deadline of the end of the month, and it's important that they do appeal if they think their assessment is unreasonable.
So the appeal is the end of January?
Yeah, I think it actually, because January 31st is on the weekend, it might be February 1st or 2nd. The date's mentioned in somewhere in the memo.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think assessment authority is always willing to talk to people short of a formal appeal as well. So.
Yeah, oftentimes if you go in there, they realize there's an error, they just change it.
All right, so yeah, not a whole lot of change in that regard, and I guess most importantly for budget process upcoming, the new taxation revenue only $37,000 this year, so that was about half of what we had budgeted for. So that's something that we'll have to keep in mind as we go forward into our financial plan process. Any other questions, comments? Yeah, okay, we'll move on then. Thank you, Director of Finance. We have the next report, which is the water rate report for consideration. Now there is a recommendation, but perhaps council will have questions, and of course if the recommendation passes, it will go to the next council meeting for the formal readings for second and third. So there is a backgrounder there, and there may be questions. So if council would like to go ahead.
I do have a question. Just to clarify, so back in the day when water meters were put in, and if somebody chose to have a water meter voluntarily, and they would still be paying whatever the bulk rate was, but they would be able to use the meter to gauge how much water they've been using without paying anything extra. But if they went over a certain amount, they would be charged. And the reason I'm asking is during the election, knocking on doors, two people said to me, I have a water meter. I didn't agree to it to be billed that way, but yet I pay the bulk rate and then I'm getting charged extra. And they said they didn't think that they should be charged extra. So I just don't know, and I just wanted to get a little...
Director of Finance can shed some light on those things.
Okay. We have roughly 40% of our water customers of all categories metered. When council decided a few years ago to proceed down the voluntary metering program path, receiving the meter was not necessarily voluntary. Council approved installing meters in all homes that were meter ready. So there were nigh on 1,000 customers in single-family homes at that point who had homes that had meter boxes and were ready to be metered. So they got meters as well. If anyone asked for a meter, they got a meter. As well, in the intervening years, as new subdivisions have been developed, or as we've done rehabilitations of roads and infrastructure, wherever we touch a water service, we bring it up to our current standards, which includes making it meter ready. Meter box and the related hardware goes in, and the meter goes in as well. So we're now up to over 1,600 homes that are metered. Now, if you're a single family home or a duplex and you've got a meter, you have a decision to make, and you can make that decision annually. You can decide to pay the flat rate, which is $327, and alternately you can pay a metered rate. The metered $180 per year plus a rate per cubic meter for water use over the minimum. And the minimum is currently 14 cubic meters a month, 168 cubic meters a year. That being said, as you can see from the attached bylaw, there is a provision that if someone uses more than 600 cubic meters of water, we can and we do bill them. Now, that being said, we warn them before we bill them. We give them fair notice. So this week I've sent out letters to everyone who used more than 500 cubic meters of water in 2014 who hadn't previously received a letter. The letter says, we know notice you're getting close to 400 or to 600 cubic meters, and here's how you can look at your meter readings up monthly on our website. We show them how to do that. 600 cubic meters of water is more than twice what the average household use is in Comox. So if you look at Comox use in year, the median use of our 1,600 customers, 800 or roughly 800 of them used under 240 cubic meters of water. But the average is still below 300. So 600 cubic meters is more than twice the average. And to put that into perspective, a cubic meter is a cube, a meter by a meter by a meter. And 600 cubic meters is a stack 600 meters high. I don't know what that is in imperial. Is that a quarter of a mile high?
It's high.
It's a lot of water. It's a lot of water, and it costs us over $600 to supply that water to the customer, because we have to buy our water from the regional district, and we lose some of it in transit and distribution. So the bottom line is that this is a very expensive proposition, and we're trying to discourage customers from wasting water or allowing it to disappear unnecessarily. Every month we write a dozen or more caution letters. If we see someone's water use spike upward in a month, and if we get an indication from their water meter, since most of the meters are electronic, they have a rudimentary memory on board, and they can track water use. If there's continuous use, they actually raise a flag that says potential water leak here. In some cases, a handful a month will actually send the Public Works employees out to do a 30-day water reading. They can hook up the water meter to a laptop and download from the meter's memory a 30-day log of water use, hour by hour. And we'll supply that to the property owner to show them whether or not there is a leak, when it started, how bad it is, and help them, if we need to, we'll go out and hold their hands a little bit to help them find what's going on. In the worst case, they're going to have to engage a plumber to solve their problem. So we do try very hard not to bill people extra. That being said, this week, $14,000 worth of invoices went out for water use in 2014. The highest was for a household that used over 2,000 cubic meters of water. So that cube stack, 2 kilometers high.
So essentially what we have is a flat rate. If anyone has a meter and they want to pay a metered rate, that's their choice. They can opt in, they can opt out on an annual basis. And for anyone who uses more than 600 cubic meters per year at a place that's been metered, obviously, then they will be billed in excess, but they do get fair warning of that. Right? Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Go ahead.
So I just have a question on the $30 a month manual fee based on someone wanting to sell their house, and I don't know if you know anyone that does conveyancing or not, but is that going to work from a lawyer's point of view?
Yeah, it does, and quite frankly, most conveyancing offices just do an estimate.
Okay.
And it's pretty typically done in other communities on the same basis. You don't come across it too often, but in other jurisdictions which are 100% metered, then this is not uncommon.
Right. Okay.
and similar with other utility companies.
And one final question. I noticed in here, you talked about the $30 fee to manually read a meter. They're all electronic or Wi-Fi or something, so do we need to actually go there and manually read them anymore?
We need to go there and manually read them if somebody asks for a reading mid-month.
On a certain day.
Right.
Essentially, they have a Bluetooth wireless connection. And so the way we read most of the meters is that we drive up and down the streets, and when the truck, which has to be equipped with a special box connected to a laptop, drives by, he'll query the water meters, he'll wake them up, get a reading, and tell them to go back to sleep. But if someone wants a reading in the middle of the month, we're not going to gear up the truck and send it out. We're just going to drive out there, pop the lid, and look in and see what the reading is.
Right, okay.
Mr. Ken?
Just a question. My understanding was that one of the values of meters, heavy meters, was that it was easier to determine leaks with meters. Has there been any progress made for flat rate users if there is a leak? I know I see where you've identified that there will be, if there's an exception, that there'll be compensation, but has there been any progress made with flat rate users in determining leaks in the system, within the system?
Well, there's no way to determine, okay.
Well, you got to be clear on your question,
Yeah.
because you're asking about flat rates. Somebody could have a meter at their house and still paying a flat rate. And yes, a leak would be found there, or perhaps an excessive billing sent.
But if they don't have the meter,
If there's no meter, there's no way of telling if there's
there's
no
no way.
leak.
Yeah.
So
I think
that's the answer to my question.
Unless there's obvious signs of, somebody's water pooling on their front yard or something.
Well, I had a smart young man from Public Works come to my house and was able to determine, and what he was able to do is stick the pipe, or the tube onto the pipe, as long as everything was shut off in the house, and he could hear whether it was running or not, and he was able to tell me that there was no leak. So you have a
But that was
smart young
because,
Public Works person.
It's kind of the equivalent, it's an electronic version of a stethoscope.
Yeah, yeah,
And you put it on the water valve and you can hear flows.
yeah.
It doesn't really tell you how much water is flowing, and if you go around and do it, at any point in time, people may be inside the house with a tap on, or a washing machine, or a shower going, in which case there would normally be flows. So you almost have to do this in the middle of the night.
Thank you.
yeah, so I mean, a third of our residential units, single family, and some of the strata are metered, so we're making some progress in that regard. And I think in many of those cases, those letters are quite helpful. People have left the tap on, or there's a toilet leaking, and it's quite remarkable actually how much can go through a system on an hourly basis. So, making some progress, and as you can see, also water is probably one of the bigger ticket items that we do spend with the regional district, and along with sewer. So as far as the rate increases go, you'll see a summary of those at the bottom of page 10. For the 2015 year, to increase the rate per cubic meter from 96 cents to 99 cents, bringing it closer to the cost that we incur of about $1 per cubic meter. And then for the excess use, from $1.44 to $1.49, an annual reading fee is referenced, and then connection fees of 2%. So those are the recommendations contained in the bylaw that we could consider for first, second, and third reading at next week's meeting if committee wishes to proceed.
I move that.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. All right, as is common, sewer follows water. And we have a similar report from our Director of Finance, again, relatively self-explanatory. I suppose it's worth mentioning the regional district expenditures in that function are going up, and so you can see what the requisitions are scheduled to rise at over the next number of years from the regional district, and our share of those. And so recommendations, I believe, are principally at the bottom of page 17, actually over the next page, $27 increase for 2015.
I'll move the recommendation.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion on sewer rates?
Thank you for the report here. Just to clarify that this is just to cover cost of increase of services, all that you've laid out here. But the increase of $27 is is basically just to cover increase in costs.
Well, that's for this year, and you'll see for the next number of years, additional increases. The requisition from the regional district is rising 11% in 2015, 10% in 2016, and so on. And those are for large capital expenditures in the sewer function. And those are forecasted over the next number of years. I suppose we had some success last year in deferring some of those and also making the increases less than we did. So that was at least some small success there, but these are related to environmental issues with moving the line off the beach, as you know, and also some capacity issues with other parts of the sewer system.
No, I thought you were going to get through all that without talking about the pump station.
What pump station? I didn't say anything about a pump station. So there you have it, for $27 in 2015. That's been moved to second. Anything further? All those in favor? Motion's carried.
Have to increase but require.
Yep.
Page 25, then we have the next report, which is an annual referral from the school district, and it's just to be received. So motion to receive is in order.
Move receipt.
That actually the two school districts, both the Francophone as well as the school district 71. You'll note no projected increases in enrollment. In fact, the projected decrease of approximately 100 students during the next 5-10 years, and also worth noting that Comoxel school site will be soon considered for disposition by the school district, so soon in the next 5 years. And that's something that's been identified, as you can see in our community plan for future development purposes. So, all those in favor of receipt?
Question,
Any discussion? Yeah.
No.
Go ahead.
I noticed the two school districts here. What about the Christian school that's purchased the Brooklyn property? Is there a requirement that we need to communicate with them?
Not under the Local Government Act, no.
Okay. Just curious as to why you don't.
It's just, it says, they're not a school district, for one. So they're just a private school. Kind of fit any other agency that would do things out of the private sector. So we just have to consult with the school districts per se.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next report, and this is one we talked about a little bit before, and this is to do with a storm sewer line near the Blackfin Pub. And the staff have come forward with the recommendation that we spend up to $80,000 for rehabilitating that section using the new technique, or relatively new technique called pipe bursting. Which doesn't make sense, but I guess the idea being that pipe is bursting, so we fix it using this technique, so
Burst it.
rather than digging it all out and doing all that other work. So,
I would move that recommendation.
Also,
and this obviously is not in our financial plan. This was a bit of a surprise, but nothing that anyone would have known about. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Do we have much other type of the vitrified clay pipe from the Dixie?
We do have certain sections, the Redwood area, the Comox Avenue on top of Redway Searview Drive has been in there. So we monitor them on an ongoing basis, and again, any type of road upgrades, those would probably be the pipes that we would be upgrading as well. I think there's one section on Mackenzie, I believe Gladstone, so they're kind of sporadic, but not much.
Okay. Councilor Arnott?
yeah, I might have asked this to Shelley once before, but so if we have say a 12-inch pipe, and so we're dragging a new pipe through that, so we're making it smaller, does that impact the flow at all? You know,
No,
or-
we're actually hoping to increase it.
Oh,
So the equipment that's used with the pipe bursting, you have basically a bursting head or an expansion head at the beginning of it. It's almost like an arrow. So as that's being pulled through, it just breaks it all up, and then you can upgrade. So we're hoping to upgrade that main as well. We're talking to the contractor to see what the additional cost would be. The capacity is there for that main, but we figured since we're there, upgrading it wouldn't be a bad thing. The recent events that have happened, so we're looking at actually, so as you break it, you can expand it.
Yeah, it shows on the schematic here on page 33 that a 150 millimeter storm will be replaced with 200 millimeter.
I noticed in here that we're hoping that we'll be able to find this $80,000 somewhere. Is that a possibility within our engineering budget for next year, or? I'm just reading it right here, so.
Well, that'll be a challenge, of course, that we'll have to address. It'll have to come from somewhere,
Yeah,
either from other projects or savings on other projects that have been completed.
right.
Um,
Oftentimes we come in under budget on things and that type of thing.
Yeah, and this, so the 80,000 is quite a healthy that I put in, because this is sort of new, it's a specialized technique, so we bring in somebody in from Surrey.
Okay.
We kind of had those discussions, but because I didn't have a budget to move forward with it, I just wanted to get it to council's attention as quickly as I can, and then, we're just going to concentrate on the worst section, the deep section where all the infrastructure and the complications are going to be, but in other areas where, because when you start at Beaufort Avenue, it's about 3 feet deep, and then it just dies down to the shore. So as we get to a depth where we can do it internally with town resources and reduce our costs, then we will stop it at that point. So the 80,000 is the broader section, maybe even going up as far as Comox Avenue, but where the section that I have highlighted is the area where it's actually failing. So depending on discussions with the contractor and where they can get in to set up their staging, because they'll have to have a staging to get in and then a staging to get out, but we're hoping that they're just going to pull it right out of the foreshore.
Okay, either that or it'll come out of your furniture and landscaping budget.
Funny that it comes to 80 grand.
We have to move the easy boys back.
Councillor Grant.
I wonder if Mr. Jaquest would have anything more to add to that.
I hearken back to the old Fram oil filter commercials, you pay me now or you pay me later. I think we have to fix the infrastructure or we'll be on the hook for the damages when it fails. So I don't see that we have an alternative. Those were my words, that we would hope, to be able to balance the budget with an extra 80,000 hit. I mean, we do have, when you look at it all across 5 years, including operating and capital expenditures, the financial plan is going to be over $90 million. So we ought to be able to find something somewhere that we can move to free up 80,000.
Thank you.
All right, great. So we ready for the question? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Again, that'll come as a recommendation from committee of the whole to next week's council for formal approval. So yeah, moving on next to the works yard replacement buildings budget for furnishings and landscaping, which is presented to you here for authorization.
Second. Shouldn't it say or pipe?
Or pipe. Any further discussion? Councillor McKinnon?
Yes, with all due respect to this, I know we were thrilled with the help being to help out in the construction of this building when it came to council last year, and pleased that it's coming under budget. My question is in regards to the monies allocated towards furniture, and just the question is that am I understanding that because it's coming under budget, they may be able to use funds from that to purchase furniture, or are they?
That's correct. That's the intent. The early indicators, well, not early indicators, the late indicators, because we are closing in on the end of the physical works, construction works, but all indicators suggest that we're going to come in under budget by a significant number, more than enough, more than adequate enough to accommodate furnishings and the landscaping. We don't have the exact figure yet, but our project manager, Harvey Goodman, assures me that we'll be well within our budgets. A good part of the term furnishings is a little bit deceptive because it's not just about tables and chairs. It's a good portion, almost $20,000 of that assigned budget represents filing. So safe, secure central filing for all of the information that we have for the departments that operate out of that building. So we do have an itemized list of the things that are required. That budget, that 50,000 estimate is an estimate only. We would ensure that we take every measure to recycle, repurpose what we possibly can to bring that number down. And just to go way back in time, virtually all of the furnishings in the former Public Works and Public Works shop were repurposed from, well, most of them came from our own homes. Virtually everything, as a matter of fact. So what I'm getting at is there's been very little expenditures over the last 25 years associated with housekeeping items or furnishings in the building. I'm not saying that's an excuse to go out and spend an enormous amount of money. It's just that's the background and the reality. We've got a very, very up-to-date building, new offices, more offices that are specialized now to the requirements of the kind of the new staffing levels, and you know, in the future direction, the requirements are quite a bit different than they were 20 years ago when we kind of moved in there.
Thank you for that clarification. The figure did seem excessive, but I think the council and public needed to hear some explanation.
All right, so you ready for the question? All those in favor? Oh, sorry, I see it on there.
Mayor, I was just going to add that some of the furniture as well, like Al's desk just deteriorated when they were trying to move it. It was just that old. So it wasn't a maybe transfer. And then a lot of the stuff, like Al was saying, we just didn't have that furniture. Like the lunchroom for parks, you know, they had the lazy boys, they didn't have the proper tables and chairs. We have the first aid room now that we're going to have it geared up properly. So a lot of additional stuff, furnishings that we never had to start with.
So I gather it's not worthwhile even having a garage sale for the old items.
No, we have trucks at the ready to haul out to the dump.
I'll just let you know before you do anything.
Absolutely.
That's a scotch coming up.
Anything further? All those in favor? Motion's carried. All right, planning report from planner, obviously regarding 6-month review of the Vitalization Incentive Program, self-explanatory report. We're 6 months into it now, and the suggestions are that we receive this information, that staff also be directed to prepare bylaw amendments allowing extension for our consideration in April of this year.
I'll move recommendations 1 and 2.
Any discussion? Councilor Grant, did you have your hand up for discussion or no?
No, just said sorry.
Okay. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you, planner, for bringing that forward to us in a timely fashion. We have a number of items of correspondence, 3 specifically. First of all, from the Town Residents Association regarding public parking in downtown Comox. What's your pleasure in that regard?
I would move receipt and that we send that to the BIA for them to look at. I'll leave that as a motion.
Thank you. Seconder for that?
I second that.
Any further discussion on that?
Yeah, I've spoken with the BIA over the years several times on this issue and asked them that they should take this on and you know, find all these parking spots, and it comes to discussion, but the action doesn't seem to ever follow. You know, there's lots of other things going on, so perhaps this will be an impetus for them to, you know, get onto it and find there's lots of parking down there. You know, it is a bit of an issue, I will admit, if you don't know where it is, but we do have quite a bit of parking in our downtown if you know where to look for it. So.
And to say, I guess, it's public parking area as well. It's actually private parking areas that the public would have access to.
Exactly.
Access to. So like behind buildings, under buildings. We're not talking street parking.
No, but like, for instance, underneath the Scotiabank building, all day you can park there. Most people don't know that. Underneath the old, where the bookstore is, for example, and behind a lot of the buildings and up the side streets. So.
Councilor Grant and then Bryce.
I wonder if the time is right now for us to be somewhat proactive as far as this parking is concerned. I haven't, quite honestly, driven around to see all of these spaces that are on the streets beyond Comox Avenue, but I am looking forward to huge success as far as our vitalization program is concerned, which of course hopefully is going to see an awful lot more cars and vehicles in our downtown. Is that something we should consider now rather than waiting until the problem exists?
Well, certainly it's always going to be an issue. Parking always brought up as a concern whenever anything happens. whether it's an event or a development. I think because the BIA has membership, which includes owners of those buildings, maybe an inventory could be done by the BIA, and then that information could be shared, and maybe there's a way that the BIA, which obviously has the most benefit from having parking downtown that's accessible and known to people, that they can help promote that the same way they promoted other things. We have, I guess, the parking at the marina, both east and west parking lots and the on-street parking. We don't have a parkade or any other, I guess we have that one other parking spot in behind, or across from Toscano's.
Yes.
But that's generally well known, so I think it's more what the private landowners would have. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, no, I guess I was thinking of it more from a town perspective, in that I'm projecting ahead 20 years, I suppose, and I can see many, many people downtown Comox.
Okay, well, and parking will be a concern for sure. Councilor Price?
Yes, so is the expectation that the BIA will provide the signs? Because I think that if we are going to go ahead with this project, actually signing it would have the most value rather than a written report.
Well, I think we need to have an inventory. Hopefully they can act on this and provide us with an inventory, and then we do have a budget for marketing activities. There might be some funding available through that to put up signage, or at least provide information on that. I don't know if there's...
Well, signage is always an interesting dilemma, because we actually had a group of kids when I was at the, not kids, they were university students, when I was at Economic Development, and they did a sign inventory of the valley. And one of the recommendations they had was, you guys have signs taking people to places that don't even exist out there. If you start really looking, and that we should really look at decluttering and getting rid of a bunch of the excess, and then perhaps looking at getting a more, something that makes a little more sense. Because we've got, there's signs everywhere, and if you start driving in down Lerwick, you'll see, turn here to go to downtown, and there's signs, like, it's a bit of a mess out there, actually. So, they did that inventory, and I could get that report for us if you like, and it sort of inventories what we should be doing. It was a valley-wide, not just a Comox one, but it would give you some perspective as to what they were doing. And it was a project that they did for a university project that they were working on. So,
yeah, signage for public parking obviously is one thing that we could look after, although again, I think our parking areas are fairly well known. It's the private property owners that if they wish to sign it for the purpose of their customers otherwise, then that's going to be something that private property owner would have to do. And the BIA quite clearly has a mandate to promote shopping and parking obviously in the business district. So.
Because I think that's the ambiguity out there now, is that is it public parking, or do you have to be in that store to, attend to the Scotiabank? I've never used that parking. So I think if we do an inventory, or if the BIA, and then we can look at a standardized signing, and if there's agreement that this comes under the category of public parking, we can start labeling it.
Yeah, I guess we've got to see what the BIA comes back with.
And Richard and I, at one point in time, did do an inventory. We walked around, we picked about 4 different days, we went different times of the day, and I think we found no less than about 25 empty parking spots, within a couple of blocks of any store at any given time. So, it's hard to argue that we have a real parking problem. It might not be right in front of the shop to Egon, but again, awareness of where they are might be a good thing. So we did do that little inventory. That was about 5 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, again, parking is always in the eye of the beholder. If they can't park where they always park, then there's no parking, right?
Yeah.
That's the way some people might approach it, but if you're willing to explore a little further or go a little further, then generally speaking, I don't think there's an issue.
Well, I think the issue for a lot of people with parking here is that it's on a hill. And so if you're having trouble walking, you don't want to be at the bottom of the hill and have to walk up. I think that if you were flat, being a block or 2 away isn't that big a deal. But, so I think that may be part of it.
And I know that the building, the Comox Harbor Center, during several events has offered parking at their place because, of course, the building isn't full. So those are promotional activities. Again, they're members of the BIA. That's probably where they're going to be able to tell us. So maybe they can provide that information, and then determine how it can be promoted. For the town to go around right now and slap up signs saying public parking here would be obviously not in keeping with the private property rates that they would have. So we need to hear from the private property owners through the BIA.
And just one last point, I mean, I think throwing into that mix too, the need for handicap parking, because for most of us, if we have to walk a bit, it really is doesn't make any difference, but for a certain number of the population, and as we've seen, we've got the oldest population in Comox, is that in the strategic places, we need to make sure that we've got adequate handicap parking with the ability to get over the curb, so we could throw that into the equation.
In terms of our on-street parking, we have allowances for that, I do believe, but again, as private property owners go, it depends on whether they're doing new construction or not, and whether the rules are applicable to whatever they're doing, so, and similar to handicap washrooms. So we provide what we can with the street parking, and again, private property owners, if it's a new building like the Harbour Centre, then there's newer criteria than there was, say, 40, 50 years ago. So to ask people to retrofit something and they're not doing a renovation, that's not something we can tell them. All right, anything further on that? I'll be referred to BIA, and hopefully a report will come back. I know we have a liaison with the BIA, so they'll be discussing it there. Any further questions? If not, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Letter from Louis Bartholomew. I think most people know about the Alberni project that he's undertaken, and perhaps no big surprise, he's asking for funding for the first time, but he's also asking for a commitment of 5 years. So at this point, and maybe with others that we may receive requests for, we're pointing out a couple of things. One is we have a no grants and aid policy. In other words, we don't provide grants and aid. That being said, we have funded organizations for various cultural activities such as the Archives and Museum, the Art Gallery in Courtenay, the Sid Williams, and we'll be discussing those as part of the budget process. So it would probably be appropriate at this point to receive it and refer it to the budget process unless there's other things you'd like to do with it.
That was my plan, I'll do that.
Okay.
I second that.
Those in favor? Motion's carried. And that budget process will start sometime in February. Yeah. And we'll take it as we go. Please, Lauren? Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. The last piece of correspondence is in relation to the Economic Development Society and proposed bylaw changes. Hopefully everyone's read this material. It's sort of been touched on in previous meetings, and I know at various sessions on governance around the Schlenker case. And I asked that this be put on today's meeting because I'm asked to go as the town's rep to a meeting on Friday with hopefully some input from you as councilman. Motion to receive the letter would be in order, and then we can discuss it.
I'll move receipt.
Second.
Receive them, all those in favor, motion's carried. And any comments, questions, or concerns? Councillor Kengran, of course, has been quite involved with this over the past couple of years, so maybe you can take the lead on it if you wish.
Well, I'm just trying to remember whether we discussed this at the RD. Was that an in-camera discussion? Yeah, I can't remember. It wasn't. So I'm a little bit, I don't really want to bring it up because I can't remember.
Well, I mean, you certainly can bring it up here. The essence of all of this is that, based on the Schlenker case, unless there's a statutory exemption for people to sit on 2 boards, if you're on 2 boards, there's a potential conflict of interest. What they're suggesting here is that the members, which are the municipalities, and the 3 area directors would simply sit there as members, non-voting directors essentially, and then there would be the board of directors, which would be comprised of the private sector representatives. I think there's 7 of them. And there would still be ongoing meetings, but the elected officials there wouldn't have a vote per se, although they would still have a role to play in terms of the annual meeting as well as the regular quarterly meetings. And they would ultimately have the call if the society was to be wound up or dissolved.
Yeah, and it's been an interesting discussion because you don't want to necessarily not have the elected officials at the table as they provide the funding through the regional district, and so you want to have that connection with them. And yet, they were sending liaison persons of their own choosing, which may or may not,
The area director.
the area directors, which may or may not have had any business background at all. And so it became, this turned out to be what we hoped would be a solution that would fit for all. I think it's important from the Economic Development Society that when people are sent there, that there's some criteria for being there, rather than just because the area director thought you were a nice guy, so he sent you. But you should have some sort of business acumen or background, as it is a business board, to do. So that was kind of, we had a lot of discussion over how to make this work. And it's particularly painful, I think, at the Economic Development Society, because it's a little larger board and it's kind of specific. It's not just really a reporting back kind of board. So, so hopefully this will do. And with regard to the regional district, they want to have a meeting that would bring all of those people to one room, and as they do the new contract and deal with governance, everyone would be in the same room, and we could have the larger discussion at that point. So,
Any other questions, Councillor Kent?
Of course, it begs the question, I think, Your Worship, that for appointees to other boards, whether the same thing would apply here, whether they'd have voting rights, such as the
It does.
Community Justice Center Board or whatnot, and
Each
I'm
board-
wondering how what
Well,
effect of this.
each organization, I know that Councillor Swift was talking about this with the Philbert Heritage Lodge. I know that Councillor Price is trying to address that, the Archives and Museum, but anybody who's not exempted by statute, which of course the library board is exempt, and sewer and water and all that is exempt. Came up the other day at the hospital district where there's an appointment to St. Joe's, but again, that's statutorily
Yeah.
exempt. So anybody who's sitting, say, on the CJC has to look at its, the CJC should be looking at its bylaws and determining whether or not they need to make changes.
and apparently in Ontario, they have a way that they deal with this. It's incumbent upon the provincial government to act on that, and the BC provincial government has not acted on that yet. So I think that there may be a solution somewhere in the future, but for now, there isn't. So we have to deal with it as best we can.
So at present, you can sit on the board, but you won't have a vote. Is that, am I correct? Is
That would be the proposal for CVEDs. That's what they're structuring the changes to that effect, and the only votes that the municipal members and the electoral directors would have are would be at an AGM to appoint directors, or if there's an issue around winding up or dissolving the society.
And the reason why I was on that board before and not off it is because technically the funding comes from the regional district, and I didn't sit on the regional district board. So therefore I wasn't voting one budget to the other. Bill Angland, on the other hand, was on both boards, so he would step aside at the regional district and not vote on budget items at the regional district, but stayed on the Economic Development Board. There's discussion, now that was a legal opinion that we had, that was okay. There's other legal opinions that say it may not be. So better safe than sorry, I think, is probably the best way to approach it.
So I guess what I'm looking for is, I'm just going to receive this information. If the council has any major objections to it, this is a good time to tell me before I go to the meeting on Friday. As Councillor Kengras indicated, there may be other meetings about it. In order to make formal changes to the bylaws, it is up to the members to do so, but they'd have to do so at an AGM, which won't be till June, so unless they call an earlier.
So,
Yes.
so I guess you'll be discussing an interim period till the AGM, and then what changes need to be made to the bylaw to make it effective.
Yeah, and I don't know what the outcome of Friday's meeting will be. We'll see what happens, and there may be a subsequent meeting with the regional district, which will involve you as well, so.
Yes, and with the service review that was done, there's a new contract with the regional district upcoming, so that's all part of that, and a new governance structure, which is, so all of this will play together, and that's why this is kind of coming to a head right now, is if we can incorporate it all into the same thing, then perhaps that interim period wouldn't be long, yeah.
Yeah, and I think CVEDS has shown itself to be acting with due diligence, and I think that's always very defensible. The reality is that nobody's yet challenged any of the decisions made at CVEDS because of the conflict of interest issue, but I know many municipalities and regional districts are working through these ramifications, if you will, of the Schlenker case, and it just takes time. So I think we're making good progress, and hopefully we can have it tuned up for this year, and then like Councilor Grant indicated, maybe the province at some point can step in and with the legislative amendment make it not a problem anymore. So we'll see. We'll see.
Are those legal terms you're using?
All right, so thank you for your comments on that. We'll proceed, and I'll let you know how it goes. Maybe as early as next week. So that's it for the agenda, other than we will be adjourning the camera meeting under section 90L of the community charter. So